So we are gathering to study the 7 points of mind training. That is our current text. And we are now in the 7th point. We're bringing together all the different understandings into a concluding synthesizing. So all of the different previous slogans are now making our practice clear, how we engage with other people clear. And these are the final words. We're with the slogan 39 and 40. I'll put those in the chat room. Correct all wrongs with one intention, and all activities should be done with one intention. And these two fit together really beautifully. Correct all wrongs with one intention and conduct all activities with one intention. So now that we're pretty much together, I'm going to put the prayer book on the screen, and we will begin with creating a beautiful aspiration and intention to benefit beings with our practice this morning. And these are our traditional opening prayers in the Drikung tradition. All sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. May they have happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the most perfect and precious Buddhahood. All sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. May they have happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the most perfect and precious Buddhahood. All sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. May they have happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the most perfect and precious Buddhahood. And as we say these opening prayers, really let these two concluding slogans, or in the concluding section, echo through your mind and see how vibrant they are as instruction. So conduct all activities with one intention. So to benefit beings, even our enemies, bring all sentient beings to Buddhahood, correct all wrongs with one intention. So seeing our limitation when we're dealing with difficult situations, immediately compassion arising, both for ourselves and for sentient beings. So let these slogans echo through the opening prayers, seeing how they are present in the opening prayers. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached by the merit of generosity and other good deeds. May I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. So I'm going to, there's a little echo, so I'm going to invite everybody to mute themselves. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached by the merit of generosity. Let me just, I'm hearing, I think it's Kathy Mills's beautiful voice I'm hearing. Okay. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached by the merit of generosity and other good deeds. May I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. as earth and the other elements together with space eternally provide sustenance in many ways for the countless sentient beings, so may I become sustenance in every way for sentient beings to the limits of space until all have attained nirvana. As the Sugatas of old gave birth to the bodhicitta and progressively established themselves in the training of a bodhisattva, so I too, for the benefit of beings, shall give birth to that bodhicitta and progressively train myself in that discipline. At this moment, my life has become fruitful. I have realized my human life. Today, I am born into the family of the Buddhas. Now I'm a child of the Buddhas. From now on, I will forthrightly perform the actions befitting my family. I will act so as not to degrade the faultlessness and discipline of my family. Just as with a blind man finding a jewel in a heap of dust, thus somehow bodhicitta has been born in me. This is the supreme Amrita which destroys death, the inexhaustible treasure which removes the world's poverty. It is the supreme medicine which cures the world's sickness, the tree which provides rest for beings weary of wandering on the paths of existence. It is the universal bridge on which all travelers may pass over the lower realms, the rising moon of mind which dispels the torment of the kleshas. It is the great sun which puts an end to the obscurity of ignorance, the pure butter which comes of churning the milk of the holy Dharma. For travelers wandering the paths of existence, seeking happiness from objects of enjoyment, it is supreme bliss near at hand, the great feast which satisfies sentient beings. Today, witnessed by all the protectors, I have welcomed the sentient beings and Sugatas. Devas and Asuras rejoice. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Okay. So that last prayer, the four immeasurables, is key to how we're understanding these instructions this morning. So this is actually the third class that we've done on this slogan combination, and we've been working with it in conjunction with the key compassion training of Tonglen. Excuse me, I'm having throat issues this morning. The key compassion training of Tonglen, because as we're moving into this section is all about how do we bring it into daily life. And if we think about how do we bring in both a training in which we're growing and allowing that heart mind to seep through into our words and into our actions, it starts with the intention. It starts with how we're thinking. So Tonglen is an exceptional, extraordinary practice that also is seeped with the four immeasurables. So primarily, it's a practice that starts with compassion, growing, strengthening, ripening compassion, and is supported by and inseparable from the other three aspects of the four immeasurables: joy, equanimity, and loving kindness. So the reason I say that Tonglen is connected to compassion is because in Tonglen, we're specifically opening our hearts and minds to the suffering of the world, and we're gathering and strengthening the capacity to have our heart-mind completely open, spacious, and undefended with the suffering of the world, so much so that the strength of our compassion invites us to breathe in that suffering and exchange and send out whatever we think is healing for that situation. But as we investigate this practice more and more in depth, we see that it has layers of understanding and is a teaching about the four immeasurables, compassion in particular, and all the four immeasurables, but also how do we go from an emotional understanding that's intellectual to a vast heart mind that is the beingness of compassion and the four immeasurables, that is a non-dual wisdom aspect of understanding compassion and the four immeasurables. And this path that starts with ourselves as a sentient being, seeing other sentient beings suffering, ripening our compassion, ripening our loving kindness and equanimity and joy into a non-dual understanding, that is the slogan. All activities should be done with one intention: to ripen the wisdom and compassion to the vast level, to the most complete levels that we can reach. And again, every time we see our limitations, to correct all wrongs with this same one intention. So Tonglen is one of the classic, most beautiful trainings because we practice it in order to see our limitations. And when we see our limitations, we relax right there, we grow and stretch and see if we can use all of our different trainings, all of the trainings we've been working with in Lojong, all of our studies, to soften that limitation and grow further. So I have a couple of quotes this morning just to help us go deeper. One is from the great teacher Longchempa. Those who take refuge and rely on it strew the flowers of compassion upon the ground of loving kindness, in the cool shade of joy, with the pure water of equanimity, train their mind for the benefit of all beings. So it's a beautiful expression of the four immeasurables and their interconnection that we will explore in our Tonglen practice. So I'm going to just remind everyone of the four stages of the Tonglen practice. The first stage is just opening our minds in relaxed spaciousness, in an undefended seat of equanimity. We are in our meditation rooms. We are working with our own imagination. We can relax the fears and limits that we have in this safe and quiet situation. And then the next three stages of the Tonglen help us see and understand how and when our compassion has limits. When do they arise? How do they arise? And what is our sort of ego involvement, intellectual involvement, lack of understanding of the wisdom of emptiness involvement that causes that limitation to stay stuck. So we're engaging this to see the limitation and then to use all of the previous training of Tonglen and all of our studies to then soften right in that moment with compassion for ourselves and begin again until we so strengthen the compassion, the loving kindness, the joy and equanimity through this process that our mind lets go of dualism and rests in the beingness of their interdependence of the four immeasurables. So the fresh, open, undefended space to the degree of our understanding of it. And then we imagine breathing in something that's cloudy, something that might be dense, something that might be a foul odor, so that in a fairly neutral way, without bringing up too much thinking, we see what is our shutting down moment. Can we identify it physically? Are there thoughts that our ego brings up of, you know, I can't stand this. I had I think probably a mouse died between the walls of my doorway into my garage. And there was such a nauseating odor that it was immediately, I can't bear this smell. It's nauseous. So, you know, even remembering that smell, that open, spacious mind contracts and resists. So whatever you can do in a fairly accessible way to explore what is that first way you notice your ego coming up and saying no, your body saying no, your mind saying no, I can't rest in spaciousness and hold this thought at the same time. The third stage is taking a situation that's close to your heart. And it may be if you have a family member, animal, or human, any sentient beings that you have an unrestricted love for, uncomplicated love for, and their suffering, that immediately your heart would leap to, if I could lift this from their shoulders for just a minute, I would breathe in that suffering and give them my strength, my fresh mind. So even with a loved one, to do that wholeheartedly and persistently is difficult. You're taking in and seeing your fear of suffering, taking in and seeing your fear of discomfort. So your ego immediately, not immediately, but after a moment, you may see it arise. So here's, let's say, we would think a fairly strong situation of opening to suffering where you feel like you could do that, also poses difficulties. And then the fourth stage is, and this is the important part, we were discussing this a little bit last week, with the same urgency, with the same commitment to alleviating their suffering, with the feeling that you would lift it onto yourself, you would go to the ends of the earth to find the right medicine, you would do anything you could to help your loved one. Can you feel with the same urgency even one other being in the same wholehearted way? Just like me, this person, we have, I'm sure everyone has many situations of dementia in their group of friends. So I might be able to say, I would take on the confusion and offer my clear mind. I would take on the distress of the family and offer my clear mind. Can I expand it to the whole nursing home with the same strength? Exactly how many numbers of people before my ego starts getting afraid, before my rational mind starts interrupting with, whatever fear we might be feeling, or whatever limit, boundary, whatever. So it honestly does not matter what situation you're imagining. It does not matter, how you choose to expand it in your imagination. In each and every case, and it may be a different situation each time you meditate, you're trying to see where the limits of the wholeheartedness close down, shut down that open, relaxed, spacious, strengthening, and ripening of your compassion and bodhicitta. And right then and there, relax, start again, start to notice, from every perspective that interrupting the rational mind with, I'm just imagining this. I'm just imagining welcoming the suffering. I'm just imagining the suffering being. How is it that an ephemeral thought, excuse me, can pass through my mind and shut down, start to close my open-hearted compassion? So when we really see the nature of the thought that we're holding in our minds, whether the nature of the thought is, compassion that is boundaryless, and another thought comes and shuts down that, we start to see that how we're working with the ripening and strengthening is connected to these illusory thoughts, and we can see those thoughts for what they are and start to see that this ground of fresh, open compassion and loving kindness can be a resting place or a dwelling that can be unaffected by any thought. And as we start to see that, we can start to see it is actually a thought that makes me over here and someone suffering over there. It is a thought that constructs the dualism that separates self and other. So we're using this training system to dissolve our limitations, to strengthen and gradually let go of both the limits that at first are maybe biases relative to equanimity, but eventually are the foundation of a dualistic view or dualistic mind itself. So that is why this is such a lifetime practice, and why it's so instructive, a mirror towards both how our ego wants to interfere and how our lack of understanding wants to interfere. So one of the second instructions that I want to emphasize this morning is we might say to ourselves, well, why isn't it enough just to be vastly open to all sentient beings? Why do we keep saying that in order for fruition, that understanding emptiness is a necessary part, or the wisdom aspect? And it's not that we want to criticize what we're doing. The seeing of the sentient beings as sentient beings, oneself and the other, is where we are right now until we're enlightened. And it is part of our growth of understanding that we're able to take the situation that's close to our heart and make it larger and larger and larger. But you can, in your experience, start to see that it's still relating to the instruction with an emotional mind, as opposed to a mind that is free from any distracting object or feeling whatsoever, which is much vaster than an emotional mind. So there is a quality of happiness in the emotional opening in an unbiased way as we gradually expand. But it can be larger because our mind is no longer bound even by the pleasure. It's simply resting in that spaciousness, unseparated by the activity of compassion, with no limit whatsoever. Once we have crossed that boundary into the non-dual. So that's a lot of information this morning, a lot of instruction about that last stage of the practice. So I invite you now, we'll go into the practice of the Tonglen. Remember, the first stage is resting in your open, spacious mind. Second, the neutral, maybe dense, maybe wet, maybe odorous, taking in, seeing what discomfort does to make your ego pop up and say no. Relaxing and opening again, breathing in the discomfort, exhaling the freshness. The third situation is the close to your heart, where you naturally would take on, I will lift, your COVID symptoms and take them on me. I will lift your confused mind of dementia and take it on and give you my fresh, open mind. Again, knowing this is your imagination, these are thoughts that are ephemeral. We are not inviting ourselves to become sick. We're trying to see where our compassion limits are and what the nature is of these thoughts that control the limits and boundaries of our compassion, and then making it bigger. So I'll ring the bell after a few minutes. And if you choose to work with all 4 sections, you may, or if you choose to work with one section, you may. Just see what feels natural for your exploration this morning. So I invite you to just look at that vast heart mind. And we've been observing how different thoughts bring our shields up. And then we notice, oh, that's a thought. And so we open and relax again. We're working with being with the suffering of the world without losing that vast, open-hearted, compassionate mind. And I want to read to you a quote from Immeasurables children. In the moment, see reactivity and return to our intention, and step forward into the discomfort in a way we can do today without judgment or hesitation, without knowing the correct response or what your response should be. Use the intention to open and move. And that's the key sentence. Use the intention to open and move. And that's what bridges this mental heart-mind training into action. We use the intention and what we're learning in the exploration to then move to what needs to be said in this moment, the action that needs to be taken in this moment, seeing each time our reactivity and going back to our intention, not needing to know, but just connecting to that open intention and noticing that difference of perspective meets the situation differently. Okay, thoughts or reflections this morning?
Can you explain a little more about how you get to that point of using the intention and having the right perspective?
Okay, so let's say our perspective is a little seed. And in meditation, we are strengthening our compassion using our imagination. And we are every day just growing a little more, a little stronger with our compassion. And then I'm going to read this last quote from Immeasurables again, because it is so illuminating. So in our imagination, our meditation training, we're seeing our reactivity and returning to our intention. And then as we move off the cushion, step forward into the world, and her words are step forward into the discomfort in a way we can do today. So even this 20 minutes of meditation, because our compassion is that much stronger, our understanding that it is a thought that passes through our mind that starts that open, fresh, undefended mind to shut down. So we know something about, an ephemeral, moving, conceptual thought is illusory. So they don't have to so strongly, so quickly shut down our fresh, open, undefended mind. So we're taking the perspective that we have this morning and we're observing, okay, I'm going to open my door and, I'm going to go walking down the street and I see my reactivity and I understand that my reactivity is a illusory thought that's just crossing my mind, that I don't have to let that illusory passing thought, that conceptual moment, shut down this open, fresh mind. It's a choice I can make. So then without judgment or hesitation, without knowing the correct response or what your response should be, that's the next thought about the quote. Let's say you visit your family, visit, whatever you're doing today, you see, oh, okay, I don't have to know what to do in this situation. I can only observe that I have a choice to keep my mind open, fresh, compassionate, or let the door slam shut. But I can pay attention to that opening and closing, that shutting down or opening, without knowing what to do. And when I take the openness into the situation instead of my reactivity, it's a different ballgame. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah. Other thoughts or reflections? So when I was reading the commentaries, Pema Chodron's commentary emphasizes communication, which I think is really interesting relative to these slogans, fearless communication. So I think from the great teachers, we might see, oh, this is how they personally worked on training their mind. And so for her, the fearless communication was a great growth that she got from this. So bringing the freshness into a fearless communication, as opposed to a fearful communication, which would be shutting down or, you should know how to do it right, kind of, why doesn't your thinking match my thinking, kind of argumentative response. And so she makes the move from the mental training of compassion right to the voice and right to how we speak. And let's see how that opens up just in terms of the words and the tones, and noticing when we start getting less brave, or when we're able, let's say if we had no ego popping up, we could just really look at the situation and say, what does this person need to hear? It's not about an argument. It's not about me being right. What do they need to hear in this moment so we both can be open? Amy, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I do, Khenmo, because I'm in something new is arising for me, and it's coming in a way that I just wasn't anticipating at all. And it feels like it relates to this whole topic today. And I guess my preconceived notion about what this was going to feel like, or a more altruistic place in myself, about how I offer wisdom, or I offer donation, or I share. But the point is that it's funny, it's coming to me in such a different way. It's almost like, gosh, I really don't even like people anymore, but there's a whole new altruistic place that's showing up. It doesn't matter what my personal self thinks. Now it just like the wisdom is just coming. Oh, invite this person to do this. Oh, talk about this. But it's so strange. I thought it like the Mahamudra type state for me, or I don't really know how to talk about it. So forgive me for my lack of intelligent communication. But the point is that I thought that my state was going to be a little bit more loving, like coming from a place of what I used to feel as personal love is not that at all. It's actually, for me right now, I just kind of watch my initial reaction, like, gosh, I really don't like you. But then immediately an offering of like, oh, well, let's invite this person to do this. Or I don't know how to describe it. It's like the wisdom just presents itself as to how to show up in a situation. But my personal love is not there. And it's a weird state to get used to in relationship to a greater number of people for me. So it doesn't feel quite right, but yet something different is happening. And I'm sorry again for my lack of cohesive communication to try to describe it to you.
That brings up a really good point. And, first I'm going to, I forgot to stop the live stream so that, we usually have our discussion, in terms of people's privacy, a little more private. So let me just do a quick dedication. Bodhicitta, excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. So at the same time, this discussion brings up such important things. So Amy, I think what you were bringing up is the difference between our emotional reaction to what we think love is, and why that's an important point. There's like a habitual emotional associations, but when we have habitual emotional associations, it's I love you. When we drop our ego and soften and open, then it's not about I love you, it's about, oh, I see there is suffering, and what would help the suffering in this moment? That's less about me having a feeling that I like and recognize about you. It's bigger. So all of the things get over time bigger and bigger and bigger, and less about I am doing something for someone to what is in this fresh open space, what alleviates suffering, what skillful means might alleviate suffering in this moment.
Yeah, it's a very interesting place for me I see my attachment to my personal love, and as it's slowly starting to fade, I'm learning how to navigate that place or that state. It's a different state, and it's almost like I'm holding on because the old part or the habitual pattern of my personal love and how I navigate the world. It's a new state to start to get comfortable with and expand into and trust personally.
Well, it's still connected to how we're learning. So it's still very important, because when we feel absolutely safe to open to our greatest feeling of love, then we recognize when that shifts due to fear or ego. And it's as though each of these different aspects keeps getting bigger until it drops away. And you're seeing lots of different mental states and learning to identify how and when reactivity arises, how and when a limit arises, when the open, fresh acceptance of the suffering of the world, the capacity to listen to the cries of the suffering starts to shut down.
Thank you, Khenmo.
Yeah, I will never end a curiosity about Tonglen practice, because it has such profound training and learning contained within the simple set of instructions. Other thoughts or curiosity expressions this morning?
This is Jeff. I'm just fascinated by what Amy just said. That's really about all I have to say. It's that whole, it's just, it's hard for me to not say much. It's sort of like that, that famous Rumi poem, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'm just fascinated, sort of like, what is love? What is hate? What is any of this? It's kind of confusing as a human.
It is kind of confusing, but this certainly, but this training system that has such interlaced supports for discovering our mind and the changeability of our mind based on the illusory thoughts, and then seeing, well, the illusory thoughts can pass through without affecting that field, as you were expressing it, that field of non-dual openness, spaciousness, full acceptance is that sort of bellwether that we're watching. Other thoughts or reflections, John?
Good morning. It's a wonderful meditation, and as I was going deeper and deeper, it almost sort of took my breath away. I started feeling like I was drying up. But then I had this wonderful flash of two bodhisattvas, deities, Jesus and Tara. Who the meaning of each of them is different in different contexts in the course of my life. But what happened was I really got a flash of appreciation of the gift of the Vajrayana path, honestly, by identifying with my Christ consciousness or the presence, the real presence of Tara in me. Tara and I are one. I felt unlimited love, and my compassion is limited by my love. I got that real clear, and I never really was able to experience so clearly the gift, why the Vajrayana path can be considered a swift path until this moment where it just suddenly I broke past the personal limitation of how much I could love when I had a sense of divine pride, the divine in me. Very beautiful.
Oh, thank you for sharing that lovely experience. I think that is, how do we even taste what boundless, spacious wisdom is? And then our taste of Tara can allow us to move beyond our ego and our fear to show us what that's like. Other thoughts or reflections this morning?
Hi, may I share?
Please.
Thank you. This is a little bit adjacent, but I was going to share that one thing I've been experimenting with in my more contracted states where that boundless and spaciousness feels past my edge, as my edge begins to collapse and move inwards, is to ask for others to help hold that boundlessness. I've been experimenting with, like, in my dyadic relationships where I have really strong contractions coming up, to almost like asking other people to hold that, myself and the other, in a dyad where they can be holding that boundless space. And like I can be with the contraction in a way that helps me also experience the space, but I don't have to hold it myself because I can't, because I'm so in the contraction. And that's been really helpful in terms of like being able to allow myself to go into that contraction and to hold it with love, while also knowing that I'm like, I don't have to be as scared about doing harm because I'm doing that in a larger field of boundlessness, even if I myself am not accessing the field in that moment.
You know, that's a beautiful description. And I think it's an intuitive relationship to, let's say, what we would describe as Vajrayana. We might imagine Tara or Chenrezig as holding our hearts. And also what you described was the second part, or the second slogan that we are connecting together. Now it's expressed in a way, correct all wrongs with one intention. So you might hear the word correct and wrong, but essentially it's, as you're saying, it's asking for help. Seeing a limitation arising and saying, how can I sit with this without judgment, go back with compassion to myself, that I'm involved in a process of ripening and growing my heart mind. And my intention is that of the more vast heart minds, and asking for the strength of their heart mind to support my heart mind. So intuitive, just wonderful ways to look at it. So it is 11. So I'll share the screen for our dedication practice, but thank you again, everybody. It's wonderful to practice together and share how we're growing and learning in this practice together. By this virtue, may I achieve omniscience, and may all who travel on the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara by defeating all enemies, confusion, the cause of suffering. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. I pray that the Lama may have good health. I pray that the Lama may have long life. I pray that your Dharma activities spread far and wide. I pray that I may not be separated from you. For this realm, encircled by snow-covered mountains, you are the source of every benefit and bliss without exception. Tenzin Gyatso, you who are one with Avalokiteshvara, may remain steadfast until samsara's end. Embodiment of the three precious jewels, Padmapani, who holds the teachings of the victorious one, seeing the all-goodness meaning with the wisdom eye, may you who are spontaneously established activities live long for hundreds of kalpas. Noble Manjushri, the Lord of Speech, who manifests to hold the teachings of the Triple Gem, who raises the lamp of the sage's teachings, may you who are the light of the Dharma live long for hundreds of kalpas. The one known in the Holy Land as Aryadeva, emanated into the Gar clan of Eastern Tibet as Chodingpa, the heart son of Jigten Sumgun, may the life of glorious Garchen remain steadfast for 100 eons. So thank you for your practice together this morning. Wonderful discussion. And we actually are going to move forward to slogan 41 next week. But it is good to really dip into the companion practice of Tonglen, because it is the way we understand all of these slogans and how to put them into practice that then propels our voice and physical actions. So take care. See you next week, or during the week. I invite you to our weekly meditation as well.